Do you know how Finnegan MacCool shaped the Giant's Causeway? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. Hi, I'm your host, and this is Did You Know? I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I always thought that it was Finn MacCool who had built the Giant's Causeway. I mean, who else would have been crazy enough to do such a thing? Well, after researching the history behind this place, I can tell you for certain that this is not the case. But don't worry, Finn still has a connection to the Giant's Causeway, and it's one that most people do and know about. So let's get into it. The Giant's Causeway was built by Finn MacCool so he could confront the Scottish giant Benanar. Okay, so that's a lie. The legend says that Finn MacCool built the causeway across the North Channel so he could challenge the Scottish giant Benanar to a fight. But in reality, there's no evidence that this ever happened. However, the story does reflect two very common themes that run through a lot of Irish folklore: strength and cunning. Causeway Coast is a UNESCO World Heritage Site famous for its striking natural beauty. It's made up of 40,000 interlocking basalt columns, which were formed by ancient volcanic activity. The story goes that Finn was so enraged by the boastful giant's insults that he set out to kill him. However, when he got to Scotland, he realized that he was no match for the brute strength of his rival. So instead, Finn used his wits to trick the giant. He challenged Benanar to a fight, stating that he would only accept a 3-day head start in order to recover from any injuries he might sustain in battle. Of course, this was a ruse, as Finn knew that the giant would accept the challenge and use up all his strength traveling to Ireland. And that's exactly what happened. By the time the Scottish giant arrived at the causeway, he was exhausted and unable to fight. Finn easily defeated him and sent him running back to Scotland. Okay, so maybe that version makes a little more sense, but unfortunately it's also not true. There's no historical evidence that Finn MacCool ever fought against a Scottish giant. But the story serves an important purpose in illustrating the cultural significance of giants in Ireland. Giants are a prominent feature in Irish mythology and folklore, often representing the country's rich natural resources and powerful past. The story of Finn and the giant Benanar is a reflection of this cultural importance. The truth is, the basalt columns of the Giant's Causeway were not built by anyone. They're a natural wonder that resulted from ancient volcanic activity. When lava met the sea, it cooled rapidly and contracted, pulling away from the land in hexagonal shapes. Over time, these shapes were eroded into the columns that we see today. This geological phenomenon is similar to other places around the world, such as Fingal's Cave in Scotland and the Giant's Boot in Iceland. However, the basalt columns at the Giant's Causeway are particularly striking and have become a major tourist attraction. So where does Finn come into all of this? Well, according to legend, Finn MacCool lost his boot while crossing the causeway. It's said that the boot became fossilized and can still be seen at the causeway today. Now, to be honest, I couldn't find any evidence that supports this story either. In fact, there is no mention of Finn MacCool or his supposed fight with the Scottish giant Benanar in any historical records or archaeological evidence. The earliest written account we have of the Giant's Causeway comes from a 17th century traveler's journal, and it doesn't mention Finn at all. However, the story of Finn and the Giant's Causeway has endured through oral tradition, and it was popularized in the 19th century when the causeway became a tourist destination. Despite the lack of historical evidence, the story of Finn MacCool and the Giant's Causeway is an important part of Irish folklore. The story of Finn and the Giant's Causeway is an important part of Irish folklore. The story reflects the country's rich mythology and its fascination with giants. Although the causeway is a natural wonder, the mythical narrative adds another layer of intrigue and fascination to this already stunning place. There are many other myths and legends associated with the Giant's Causeway, but I'll save them for another day. For now, though, I want to talk a little bit more about the basalt columns themselves. The columns are thought to have formed around 50 to 60 million years ago, when a series of volcanic eruptions created a vast lava field. Over millions of years, the lava cooled and hardened. The different rates of cooling created the distinctive hexagonal shapes. These shapes are a result of a process known as columnar jointing, which occurs when lava cools and contracts, causing it to pull away from its surroundings. The resulting cracks are filled with a dark mineral called basalt, which is rich in iron and magnesium. As the basalt hardens, it expands, creating the hexagonal columns that we see today. The Giant's Causeway is one of the most famous places in Ireland, attracting thousands of visitors each year. The interlocking columns are the main attraction, and they have been the subject of much scientific study. The exact mechanism by which the columns formed is still debated, but it is generally agreed that the rapid cooling of lava is responsible. The columns are also thought to have been shaped by erosion over time, with the softer rock being worn away more quickly than the harder basalt. This has created the smooth, almost perfectly hexagonal shapes that are so striking today. I hope you enjoyed learning more about the Giant's Causeway and the fascinating legend of MacCool. If you did, please let me know in the comments below. And if you're planning a trip to Northern Ireland, I highly recommend checking it out for yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.